Thank you, Mark, for your kind words. Good day, everyone. Really glad to join this forum. Special thanks to Mr. Randa, the CEO of Solomon Islands Ports Authority. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Let me just share the slides here, please. Can you see the slides?
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you very much. Okay. Right. I'll be speaking a bit on the issues pertaining to global warming and also the impact of global warming and on port and shipping activities. Also touch a little bit on the actions and the mitigation taken to counter the climate change and global warming. Very briefly, we'll also share some initiatives that we have taken here in Port Klang. And finally, I'll speak on some collaborative measures that we have taken on with some international organizations, of which Port Klang Authority has been a member. So let me start with the first slide. I think this may be a repeat to what has been said earlier. Seaports are very much a very important component within the maritime industry. We facilitate 80% of the world trade, and I think we are the one of the biggest industries that have been very active even during the COVID-19 pandemic all around the world. I know many ports who are actively still operating themselves to make sure the trade flows, despite the fact that many other industries are on shutdown mode or being interrupted. So we bring together global markets and keep the supply chains going. The maritime transport itself is huge in the fact that it facilitates the transfer of goods, fisheries even, and energy, tourism, defense and communications. But however, ports being where we are located close to the sea, we are always exposed to natural hazards, rising sea level, storms, waves, flooding, even natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis. So all this will definitely have an impact on port operations and shipping activities. On global warming, there are many natural processes that we are all aware of. But what's also equally important is human activities. We know that human activities contribute hugely to what we are going through now, the global warming and climate change. The greenhouse gases is a big issue for us, including CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, and water vapor. And mankind being mankind, in the name of development, we sometimes do the inevitable, and in the process of bringing development, we also so responsible for some of the damage that we cause to the environment. So very briefly, just to touch on the global sea level and temperature rise, this is a big issue now, especially in ports where we are located in a very susceptible area. I'll just touch on a few points. The increase in intensity of winds, waves, and typhoons. Port Klang, as such, we are quite fortunate. We are located in the Malacca Straits, well shielded by the island of Sumatra on our western side. And we have actually a very protected port here with many outlying islands who normally act as a shield against strong winds and large waves. But having said that, I think we have seen over the years some changes where the amount of rainfall and also the pattern of rainfall is changing. Although we don't experience any typhoons or hurricanes around this area, but occasionally we do get strong winds which will affect the port operations. The other one is, of course, coastal erosion and sedimentation. We are located at a river estuary, and therefore we are very much affected by flows down the river, especially from the hinterland. And the fact that rivers normally bring down unmitigated debris right along the path of the river flow and normally deposits at the mouth of the river. So therefore, this is where with increased rainfall, we do get a lot of debris coming down as well. And finally, we can see the changes here. The existence of flora and fauna within the port area. This is slowly changing. We used to be a haven for mangroves, but we are slowly losing some of those, and it can be attributed to human activities as well. On the impact on ports, as I mentioned earlier, safety aspects on navigation and port operations. Wharf structures, I mean, we used to build wharfs with a height of about 6.5 meters above chart datum. But then today we have to build them about a meter higher. And naturally, over the last 30, 40 years, we have seen the tidal levels actually rising here. And coastal erosions, they give rise to sedimentation inside the port. And this is a burden to the port where it adds costs to dredging. Eventually, these factors, if they are not mitigated, they will disrupt port operations and logistics operations as well. So coming to these slides of what we are going to do or what we are doing right now, we are all clear about the United Nations SDG on Goal 13, urgent action needed by ports and shipping to mitigate the impact on climate change as well as global warming. So these are some of the initiatives that they're taking, using cleaner bunker fuel, low sulfur fuel, LNG, biofuels, which will result in lower greenhouse gas emissions. Onshore power supply, it's not easy for us to transform existing wharves to include this facility. So what we've done is we'll probably include them into new wharf developments. Installing water permeable pavements. This is a technique that has gained popularity, and we are hoping that this will actually be a protection against floods and storm water. Sustainable energy towards renewable energy as well. So we're looking at wind and solar, electrification and automation of terminal equipment, as well as green and sustainable policies. So very specifically, what Port Klang has done over the last 3 years, we have ramped up our strategies and also our initiatives. There is a very clear green port policy that we have at the moment, which is driving our future consideration and development plans. Firstly, is looking at environmental friendly equipment and facilities, which are energy efficient. And, we are in a transition mode now where we are replacing some of the older equipment. And any new facilities that are built in the port, they will be carrying green design requirements. And we have adopted what is known as the Industrial Revolution 4.0, which incorporates all these features. And one of the areas that we are looking at very seriously is to improve the use of digitization within the supply chain. Although we were quite early in using digitization in Port Klang back in the late 90s, however, I don't think we really emphasized on encompassing the whole supply chain. It was very port-centric within the terminals, within the port area. But over the last year and a half, we have seen how important digitization is to the whole supply chain. And therefore, the impetus now is to drive this across the supply chain industry, right down to the, even to factories and industrial areas. And we are already in the midst of testing LNG terminal trucks to replace those conventional engines. On the green concept, our garden port concept, conservation is an ongoing thing. Rehabilitation, this is something that we will be introducing when we go into our next project of expansion in the port, which is the West Ports Phase 2, where we will be taking over a small piece of land which currently has a considerable population of wildlife. So there is going to be some relocation of this wildlife. We hope to move them to some islands nearby and give them a new home. And finally, green landscape. This is a project that has been going on for the last 10 years. We are trying to create a garden within the port to change the image of ports being areas which are not so interesting to come to. But we have been successful to a certain extent in creating a green lung within the port area. We can't run away from engaging the community. I think the community around the port is very much demanding that the port actually keeps them in the loop of what's happening. And that's where we have now started engaging more with the community around the port to ensure that all our plans and our projects are properly transmitted and communicated with them so that the buy-in is for the benefit of everyone. Awareness, before COVID-19, many people did not even realize or took for granted the role of ports until they then found that they are still getting their supplies coming in. Their daily goods are still coming in. And that's where many realize that the role of ports is very important in a nation's economy. And if you all recollect, when Ever Given ran aground in Suez some months ago, suddenly the world woke up to the fact that there was 6 days of interruption for shipping between Asia and Europe. And that actually made many realize the importance of ports and shipping. So I think this is probably an opportune time for us to bring the community together. And it's not just to tell them what we are doing in the port, but I think we need to also share what we're doing within the port and the shipping industry to ensure that we are driving towards a sustainable port and shipping industry in the future. I spoke earlier of the renewable energy, use of renewable energy, solar, wind, and biomass. This is an initiative that is, I think, gaining traction around the world. We have a policy now. Every warehouse that is constructed in the port since last year has to have solar energy capabilities. So any new investment has to include this as well. And finally, on environmental protection, waste management facilities are already being created on a bigger scale now. We used to have very small port reception facilities, but right now we have ramped it up to include even sorting centers within the port area and to ensure that in future, in fact, we've got a plan to have a recycling facilities within the port over the next 2 years. And driving the message home on the 3R, I think this cannot be overemphasized: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Very much within the port industry as well. This is a slide I'd like to share on some of the collaborative measures we have undertaken. The first one is IAPH. This is a very effective organization. It's been around for more than 65 years now. It has got about 190 members, and many of them are port authorities, terminal operators. And IAPH has got several forums which are working on improving the sustainability of ports. Just to touch on a few, we have an initiative known as the ESI, the Environmental Ship Index. This is actually measuring the effectiveness of a vessel when it comes to compliance of emissions. And such a measurement, when it's made on the ship, it is actually shared with port authorities so that port authorities can make a learned decision on how they will treat such vessels when they're calling their ports. So the initiatives on board the ship should be above normal regulatory requirements. So if they are actually doing something above those requirements, then ports are free to actually choose whether they want to reward them when they're calling their ports. IAPH has actually recently created 3 committees which are very much on track to towards addressing climate change and also efficiency of ports. One particular subcommittee we have is the energy and climate change. This one looks at a lot of initiatives as what we have already spoken about earlier. And one of the projects that are being worked on currently by IAPH is the port call optimization. I think this is also driven by the shipping industry, and IAPH is working very closely with the shipping industry to ensure that ships that are calling ports, when they do actually come in, they are actually given proper advice on when is the berth available, so that they do not waste or come on full steam and finally realize that they don't have a berth and they have to anchor within the port area. And this is where the ports are working together to come up on the communication with the communication plan with the ships to ensure the right information is related to ship, to inform them on the availability of the berths, the exact time they're going to berth, exact time the pilot is berthing, and exact time that the cargo operations will be commenced and completed. So this improves the vessel's scheduling, and I'm sure they will be able to plan better on their port stay and their subsequent voyages. APEC is another organization that we work together very closely. One particular agency within the APEC is the Asia Pacific Port Services Network. This particular agency works in moving these initiatives of improving port efficiency and projects on climate change as well. So APEC is based, APSN is based in Beijing, China, but it's represented by all the members of APEC. The World Port Sustainability Program is another one within the IAPH, and they too deal with some of the areas that I've already mentioned earlier. Another collaborative exchange we have is the Port Authorities Roundtable. This is an organization that came about 7 years ago, initiated by Singapore, the Port of Singapore. Today we have about 22 members, and this is a forum that we are able to share a lot of ideas and best practices on what's being done across the world in the major ports. And finally, with the ASEAN Ports Association, these are represented by the 10 ASEAN countries, or rather the 9, with one is landlocked, of course, with the 9 ASEAN countries in their ports, where we have frequent exchanges and meetings and workshops to ensure that this is one of the agenda on climate change and initiatives to counter climate change. So in conclusion, we need to actually quickly dwell on this problem of climate change and look at this issues of tackling greenhouse gases on an urgent basis. This is something that cannot be put off. I think the Green Voyage 2050 is a good program working towards reducing our GHGs by 50% in the shipping industry. And I think that's a good forum for the ports to actually work together with the shipping industry in ensuring that this is achieved. Strategies to face future climate changes and disruptions using digital technology. I think we cannot overstate this. If you want to bring efficiency into our port operations, one of the tools is digitization, and that is what we are driving here in Port Klang. The commitment to reduce emission and greenhouse gases to protect the environment towards developing a sustainable industry of the port for the future. Again, we are looking at long term here, and we have to have those initiatives in place very quickly. Continuous planning and development of resilient infrastructure and services towards meeting future challenges. So this is another factor when we have port planning. for future facilities, this has to be incorporated inside. And finally, the importance of international and global cooperation. We need to come together on a global scale, because there are many different initiatives that are taking place in different parts of the world. And this is where the various agencies that are working to bring the world together, I think that we are able to share our experiences, our technology, and so that people across the world are able to benefit from this work that is being done. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.